We live in an age where simply existing is no longer enough. We must perform. There was a time when the idea of a perfect life belonged to mythology, fairy tales, or advertising, something distant, symbolic, unreachable. But today, perfection has become an expectation, a ritual, a daily burden. The filtered image has replaced the lived experience. A good moment isn't truly good unless it can be captured, edited, and shared. Our lives are no longer our own. They are staged productions, open to public interpretation and validation. In the past, people feared God, then they feared society. Now they fear the algorithm. Jean-Paul Sartre spoke of bad faith, the way we deceive ourselves by playing roles that protect us from the anxiety of freedom. But now, this self-deception isn't just internal. It's broadcast to the world. We curate ourselves into a persona, not to explore who we are, but to escape who we might be. In this theater of illusion, everyone becomes both actor and spectator, endlessly switching roles in pursuit of a fleeting applause. This new ideology of perfection is subtle, seductive, and cruel. It doesn't scream. It whispers in the form of comparisons, in the silence between likes, in the pause before we hit post. The perfect life isn't just something we desire. It's something we believe we must fabricate to stay relevant, to feel seen. Even failure, once a mark of human depth and growth, is now aestheticized and rebranded as a lesson for engagement. But real failure, the kind that humbles and cracks us open, has no place in this system. It's hidden, buried, replaced with staged vulnerability and orchestrated authenticity. The result is a collective performance where everyone is exhausted, but no one can admit it. Everyone is pretending to live their best life, while secretly feeling like they're falling behind. The emotional cost is enormous. And yet, we continue, because not performing feels like disappearing. The show must go on, even if we vanish behind the curtain. There is a strange violence in this pursuit of perfection. Not the kind that leaves bruises on the body, but the kind that fractures the soul. We are encouraged to edit ourselves until nothing real remains. Pain must be reframed, struggle must be sanitized, and joy must be exaggerated. This creates a reality where the ordinary becomes invisible and the extraordinary becomes mandatory. What's lost in this process is not just our ability to be honest with others, but to be honest with ourselves. The person we show the world begins to replace the person we truly are. And after years of performance, we forget the difference. We become estranged from our own emotions, our own desires, our own imperfections. Sartre warned that living in bad faith was a kind of existential death, a refusal to take ownership of one's freedom. In today's world, this refusal is incentivized, rewarded, and normalized. We no longer ask, "Who am I?" We ask, "How do I look?" And in that shift, something sacred is lost. The most dangerous part of this illusion is that it doesn't feel like a lie. It feels like progress, like success, like evolution. We've been taught that we're becoming more connected, more visible, more empowered. But visibility without authenticity is not connection. It's surveillance. Empowerment without truth is not liberation. It's performance anxiety. The ideology of perfection turns life into a brand, the self into a product, and human experience into content. We begin to market our joy, monetize our suffering, and measure our worth through engagement metrics. And the terrifying irony is that the more perfectly we present ourselves, the more alienated we become, from each other and from ourselves. The illusion grows stronger as the self grows weaker. It is no longer enough to be. We must constantly prove our being to others. And in doing so, we forget how to simply exist. We become strangers in our own lives, haunted by the personas we've created and trapped in a digital mirror that reflects only what we think the world wants to see. In a world obsessed with appearances, Erich Fromm's distinction between being and having becomes more urgent than ever. We've crossed a threshold where value no longer lies in what we are, but in what we possess, or, more precisely, in what we can display. Not just possessions in the traditional sense, but curated fragments of identity. A well-traveled passport, a chiseled body, a thriving relationship, a high-performing career. These aren't merely facets of life. They've become the currency of worth. The modern self is shaped not from within, but from outside. It's assembled, like a storefront, to be browsed and approved. Fromm feared the rise of this mode of existence, where one's essence is measured by visibility, and invisibility feels like insignificance. To be is no longer enough. We must have beauty, have success, have relevance, or risk vanishing in a culture that only sees what shines. And what's most tragic is that this shift doesn't bring us closer to ourselves. It pulls us further away. Under this logic, our sense of self begins to hollow out. We become silhouettes animated by validation. Instead of turning inward, we turn ourselves into reflections of what others want to see. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the interior life withers. The joy of solitude is replaced by the panic of disconnection. The richness of introspection is drowned out by the need to update, respond, remain visible. This is not connection. It's exposure. Not self-expression, but self-commodification. Fromm believed that the human being, at their core, longs for meaning through presence, love, and authenticity. But those things cannot survive in an environment that rewards constant display and punishes stillness. When silence is mistaken for irrelevance and depth is too slow for the feed, the soul becomes a liability. The performance becomes the only truth we're allowed to live. And the more we perform, the harder it is to remember who we were before the show began. The tragedy of the performative self is that it can never truly rest. It is always on, always calculating, always seeking the next moment of affirmation. But this pursuit has no end, because it is built on a fundamental lie, that we are only as valuable as what we appear to be. In this economy of identity, failure is a scandal, imperfection is weakness, and uncertainty is taboo. Yet, it is in these very human states, the ones we now exile, that we find depth, growth, and real connection. Fromm warned that without authenticity, human beings become alienated, not just from society, but from themselves. They become strangers to their own inner lives. And when this alienation becomes normalized, we lose more than just peace of mind. We lose the ability to love honestly, to grieve sincerely, to exist without performing. The self becomes a stage, and even our most private feelings are filtered through an invisible audience. We no longer cry. We post about crying. We no longer feel. We narrate the feeling. What emerges from this is a deep existential fatigue, a weariness that has no clear source, no visible wound, but weighs heavily on the spirit. We sense that something is missing, but can't name it. We reach for more followers, more goals, more distractions, and only feel further away from ourselves. This is the loss Fromm spoke of, the erosion of being. When the self is no longer rooted in presence, in awareness, in truth, it becomes unstable, a ghost wandering through its own life. And the haunting part is that we participate willingly. We build the cage, decorate it, and then call it freedom. But true freedom, as Fromm reminds us, is not found in endless choices or constant affirmation. It's found in the courage to live honestly, even when that honesty makes us invisible. To reclaim being, we must first learn how to exist without performing. We must sit with the uncomfortable, the unpolished, the unmarketable parts of ourselves. Only then can we begin to rediscover what it means to be truly alive. In the eyes of Byung-Chul, Our age is not defined by repression, but by excess, not by prohibitions, but by demands. We live under the weight of a new kind of tyranny, the tyranny of positivity. This isn't the radiant optimism of someone who has suffered and grown. It's the aggressive mandate to be well, to look well, to perform well at all times. Positivity is no longer a feeling, it's an obligation. Sorrow becomes an error, fatigue, a flaw, silence, a threat. We are expected to convert every ache into an opportunity, every failure into a slogan, every breakdown into resilience. And while this sounds empowering on the surface, it hides a deep violence, a refusal to allow space for the full spectrum of human experience. Han argues that in this world of excessive transparency and performance, even the soul becomes data. There is no room for shadows, and yet without shadows, nothing can have depth. What we call light is often just exposure, and what we call connection is often just surveillance. The tyranny of positivity thrives in a system that demands self-exploitation disguised as self-care. We are told that rest is essential, but only if it makes us more productive. That joy is vital, but only if it can be captured and shared. That wellness matters, but only if it fits a certain aesthetic. Han sees this not as liberation, but as a deeper form of control. When we believe we are choosing, but are in fact obeying, the pressure to be relentlessly upbeat, engaged, grateful, and efficient doesn't come from a dictator. It comes from within. We have internalized the algorithm. We have become both prisoner and guard, disciplining ourselves into endless optimization. This is what Han calls the achievement society, where everyone becomes an entrepreneur of the self. And in this economy, negativity is not just frowned upon, it's pathologized. To be melancholic is to be unwell. To pause is to fall behind. We push, smile, post, repeat, until even happiness becomes exhausting. What gets lost in this enforced brightness is the complexity of being human. Darkness is not a glitch in our system. It is part of what makes us whole. Suffering is not always a lesson. Sometimes it's just suffering. And yet we are no longer allowed to grieve without reframing it as growth. We can't be tired without apologizing. We can't be lost without pretending to be on a journey. Han warns that this erasure of the negative creates a flattened world, one where everything is visible, but nothing is felt deeply. The soul is stretched thin across 1,000 updates, stripped of its quiet, its solitude, its pain. And in this world, real transformation becomes impossible, because transformation requires descent into confusion, into silence, into despair. Without those, we can only improve, never change. We become glossy versions of ourselves, polished but petrified, alive but anesthetized. In protecting ourselves from the dark, we have exiled everything that makes the light matter. And so we smile, not because we are happy, but because the system demands it. We share, not out of connection, but out of obligation. We perform, not to express ourselves, but to prove that we're coping, thriving, winning. The violence of positivity is not loud, it's polite. It wears pastel colors, it speaks in motivational quotes, but beneath it lies a deep denial of human truth. Han's insight is chilling. A society that abolishes pain abolishes the possibility of depth. In refusing to suffer, we refuse to feel. And in refusing to feel, we begin to forget who we are. The human spirit does not grow in constant sunlight. It requires night, dormancy, decay. Without those, we become brittle, fragile. And so the antidote to this tyranny may not be more brightness, but the quiet courage to embrace our shadows, to reclaim the dignity of silence, to sit with sadness without needing to repackage it. There is nothing more radical in an age of optimization than to simply be broken, quiet, and real. In the silent theater of our digital lives, the psychological toll of the performance becomes almost unbearable. The illusion of a perfect life does not merely distort reality, it wounds the psyche. We are no longer living with ourselves, but against ourselves. Every scroll, every comparison, every image of curated bliss becomes a mirror. And in that mirror, we see not who we are, but everything we are not. Shame emerges, not from moral failure, but from aesthetic inadequacy. We feel ashamed of our sadness, our solitude, our unmet dreams. We feel ashamed for not being what we pretend to be. This shame is quiet, chronic, corrosive. It lives beneath the skin, behind the smile. It whispers that we are not enough and never will be. And because the world around us mirrors that same illusion back to us, a collective performance of perfection, we believe the lie is truth. We think we are alone in our pain, while everyone else is thriving. But the truth is, most of us are drowning just beneath the surface. Anxiety, too, takes on a new shape in this world of constant self-display. It is no longer the anxiety of the unknown. It is the anxiety of not being seen, or worse, being seen for who we truly are. We live in terror of exposure and invisibility at the same time. There's a subtle cruelty in having to perform joy when we feel nothing, or to feign strength when we are unraveling inside. The modern psyche becomes a battleground between the curated self and the repressed self. We are afraid to stop performing because we fear what might surface in the silence. And so we stay busy. We stay connected. We stay updated. Not to feel alive, but to avoid feeling at all. The anxiety of performance is not fleeting. It's embedded in our routines, our gestures, even our identities. It distorts our relationships, turning intimacy into spectacle. Vulnerability becomes performance art. Love becomes a brand. We are not anxious because we're weak. We're anxious because we're pretending to be strong all the time. Over time, this dissonance creates a void. Not an emptiness that inspires reflection, but a hollowness that eats away at meaning itself. The more we curate, the less we connect. The more we present ourselves, the less we recognize ourselves. The void grows silently, not because we lack experiences, but because those experiences are never truly lived, only documented. We attend to moments only to transform them into content. We feel pressure to be interesting, likable, visible, but we no longer know how to just be. And when the applause fades, when the post goes unnoticed, when the facade cracks even for a moment, we're left with a terrifying question. Who am I without all this? That question doesn't lead to insight. It often leads to collapse. Depression, burnout, numbness. These are not signs of failure. They are signals from the self, crying out beneath layers of performance, begging to be felt. But in a world where feeling is inefficient, even pain becomes something to hide. Perhaps the most tragic consequence of all is the internalization of blame. When we inevitably fail to keep up, when the mask slips or the cracks show, we don't question the system. We question ourselves. We think we're broken, unworthy, insufficient. The culture of perfection convinces us that any form of suffering is a personal flaw rather than a collective sickness. And so we punish ourselves. With more effort, more filters, more silence. We shrink into self-loathing, never realizing that what's crushing us isn't who we are, but the roles we've been forced to play. In trying to become everything, we lose the right to be anything. The irony is sharp and cruel. The more we conform to the ideal, the further we drift from reality. And reality, in all its mess and mystery, is where healing begins. But first, we must name the wound. We must see the shame, the anxiety, the emptiness, not as signs of failure, but as acts of resistance. Because to feel pain in a culture of numbness is not weakness. It is proof that we are still human. To break free from the illusion of a perfect life is not an act of rebellion. It is an act of survival. But it is not easy. We are so deeply entangled in the performance that silence feels like death, imperfection feels like exposure, and rest feels like failure. And yet, healing begins exactly there, in the places we have been taught to hide. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Man is condemned to be free, not as a curse, but as a calling." We cannot hide forever behind roles and expectations without losing something sacred. To live authentically is to accept that we are fractured, unfinished, and beautifully flawed. It is to stop asking, "How should I appear?" and begin asking, "What do I truly feel?" This shift is not glamorous. It does not photograph well. It cannot be posted. But it is real. And reality, after so long adrift in performance, is the rarest thing of all. The return to the self begins in silence, in slowness, in sorrow, in all the places we have abandoned for the sake of approval. Erich Fromm urged us to choose being over having, not as a slogan, but as a path back to meaning. Being is quiet. It cannot be monetized. It resists spectacle. It demands presence. And this presence is painful at first, because it reveals everything we've avoided. Our loneliness, our fears, our lost time. But it also opens the door to something profound, intimacy with ourselves. Fromm believed that the authentic self is not found through accumulation, but through relation. To others, to nature, to love, to our own vulnerability. In a world that rewards perfection, choosing to be real is a radical act. And that realness doesn't mean constant happiness or unwavering confidence. It means owning our contradictions. It means laughing while broken, crying while hopeful, doubting while still choosing to move forward. It means giving ourselves permission to be human again, to live not as a brand, but as a being, soft, raw, whole in our brokenness. Byung-Chul Han's critique of the Transparency Society points toward the urgency of reclaiming our interiority. Not everything needs to be seen to be valid. Not every emotion must be explained. There is power in what is hidden, sacred in what is silent. To escape the illusion is not to disappear from the world. It is to re-enter it with depth, with boundaries, with a sense that not everything we are needs to be consumed. The self is not content. It is not a performance. It is not a product. It is a mystery to be lived, not a role to be perfected. Han warns that the constant demand for positivity erases our humanity, but he also points, indirectly, to a way out, to embrace stillness, to recover solitude, to learn again how to be with ourselves without witnesses. In that quiet, we begin to remember who we were before the performance, or perhaps discover who we've always been beneath it. And so, the path forward is not linear, not clean, not impressive. It is messy. It is honest. It is slow. To embrace the broken self is to step into a life that is not about appearing perfect, but about being whole, even in fragments. There is no freedom in the illusion. There is only exhaustion. True freedom begins the moment we stop editing ourselves for others. The moment we allow ourselves to fail without shame, to rest without guilt, to speak without rehearsing. The moment we understand that being real will cost us popularity, control, maybe even admiration. But it will give us something deeper: peace, depth, meaning. We do not need to be perfect to be worthy. We do not need to be visible to be real. What we need is courage. The courage to be human in a world that wants machines. The courage to feel in a culture that prefers numbness. The courage to live, not for applause, but for truth.